Greetings one and all, super Tuesdays from the Holy Land, the Holy Apple, the Holy Hilltop, Tal Binyamin, here as we begin the first week of the second Adar. Yes, we are on the third day of the second Adar, 5782. This is part 2 of our class, The Great Reset, Purim, Conspiracy Theories? Question mark. Okay, this will be our final class on this subject. Our major question is, what is the tremendous amount of joy and celebration connected to the holiday of Purim, more so than any other times of the year? And so far we've seen a point that there is a lot, the joy that we celebrate this time of year has a lot to do with the destruction and fall of our enemies, more so than any other time of the year. So that go back to the first class. I hope every class is first class if you get the pun, but check it out. And we're going to go on further. Just a last point that we made in the last class was the commentator of the Torah, the Sforno, tells us that the Torah, of course, as we know, in Tractate Sanhedrin 94, side 1, it tells us criticism against Jethro, that Jethro, when he heard from Moses what had happened to the Egyptians in Egypt, etc., and also at the sea, that made, so to speak, Jethro cringe. He was not happy. He was himself a citizen of Egypt until he was forced to run away to save his life, after he was one of the advisors to King Pharaoh. So we said that a person that is zealous for the honor of God should be very overly joyous when he hears about the downfall of the wicked, because as long as the wicked are ruling, then this is taking God's name and pulling it through the mud. This is a desecration of God's name. When God avenges, when God punishes the nations of the world for all their evil, this is a sanctification of God's name, a bringing up. So he takes to task Jethro. However, many of the commentators come to the defense of Jethro, but with a big twist on it, and it's an important twist. So let's see it. Our first, drum roll please, our first source will be Rebbe Yaakov of Radzamin. Okay, so the Rebbe of the Radzamin says the following. To understand the bottom line of Jethro is that it is true, when he first heard, his first reaction when he heard about what happened to the Egyptians and their punishments, he was upset about that. However, of course, he overcame those natural tendencies, those natural feelings, and he brought upon himself tremendous joy to hear about the punishment and vengeance against the Egyptians. That is the take of Rebbe Yaakov of Radzamin. That's number one. Number two, that could be found in the book Mivaser Tov on page 231. Next source is the book called Ner L'Tzadik. It's on page 281. Listen closely. When Jethro felt sad about the destruction of the Egyptians, he became disgusted with himself. How can he still be attached to such a nation? This really bothered him. Yes, he was upset, and he was upset that he was upset, so to speak. I'm shocked that you're shocked, the rabbi would always say. So he was disgusted with himself that he was unhappy at the first second. With tremendous sacrifice, this is amazing, Jethro performed upon himself, his body, a circumcision. We are told in mystical writings that the circumcision area, what's called the Yesod, the foundation in mystical language, is connected directly to a person's mind. Therefore, we know in Judaism, in Jewish law, there is much concentration, there is a big stress that when a person is together with their spouse, what is in our minds at the time that we are together. Once again, the connection between the reproducing organ, the circumcision, and our mind, it's one direct line. It's very connected, influenced one to the other. So therefore our mind, which is connected to the reproducing organs, that is exactly the idea that Jethro had to perform a circumcision on himself, and he knew that would straighten out his mind, straighten out his ideas, his ideology in life. Amazing thing. So there is no necessarily, it's not like the Talmud is rebuking or condemning Jethro. It's telling us the exact opposite, that it is true that Jethro felt a first-second connection and a sadness, but he worked on himself, and eventually he felt tremendous joy when he heard about the punishment of the evil Egyptian empire. Next, moving right along. This is the Khatam Sofer on the Tractate of Sanhedrin, 94, side A. The Khatam Sofer says this in his commentary. Jethro was very upset with himself that he was feeling bad about the Egyptians suffering. Though he previously had circumcised himself, when he felt a connection still to the Egyptian people and their suffering, he understood, he realized there's some blemish that must be in his circumcision. There must be something that he did not do in its proper way, and therefore, like a person who is born with a circumcision, we still take a little bit, we let blood. And that is exactly, the Khatam Sofer tells us, that is what happened. Jethro felt that there was something missing. When he performed on himself a circumcision, there was still something missing, and that was allowing him to still be, his body still to be connected to the fate and destiny of the Egyptians. And he wanted to break the chains, the contact, the connection, and he did. And there, after that, he became tremendously joyful about the punishment and vengeance against the Egyptians after all they had done. Next, moving right on, an amazing lesson. This is really tremendously amazing. This is probably totally diametrically opposed to worldview, especially today when we're talking about in the shadows of the wars that are taking place, Russia, Ukraine. Listen to this. This appears, the Khatam Sofer, in his sermons. It's in the 3rd volume of his sermons on page 271. Now listen closely to this amazing idea, diametrically opposed to the world, or perhaps even to Jews, and to perhaps even us religious Jews. We're going to learn amazing lessons as we go on this journey of the Khatam Sofer. So let's take it from the top. Khatam Sofer tells us, he asks a question, why was God against the Jewish people praying when they arrived on the sea? What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? To fight the Egyptians? They were a nation of slaves. How exactly are you going to turn around and fight an army that is trained, well trained? What are they supposed to do, God? But Moses tells them, God has said, quiet. This is bizarre. When God puts us into a foxhole, it's for us to pray. This is brought down in the Torah in many variations all of the time. God wants to hear our prayers. Many times God puts us into difficult situations in order to bring out that purity, that prayer from the depths of our soul. Listen to this. This is really amazing. You know, sometimes we look at the Jewish people and we say what? Like, what is going down? Like, we must have missed the train here. What is wrong with us? We need a national couch, psychiatrist, psychologist. Listen to this. God said to Moses, tell him not to pray. Why? God saw that they were going to pray that the Egyptians would be spared. Folks, you heard it correctly. You don't have to clear out. You don't have to Q-tip your ears. You heard it correctly. Amazingly, the Jewish people were going to pray. The Egyptians are chasing after them. Spears, the whole 9 yards. We got the sea in front of us. The Jewish people are going to pray, listen, God, please save us, but spare the Egyptians. That's possible. Of course it's possible. We know that the Egyptians, for a while, God delayed their arrival at the Jewish people by setting up a cloud of fire, etc. So God could do this. God is all powerful. He could save the Jewish people without having to destroy and kill and murder families. People have families, their husbands, there's wives, there's orphans. Bring me the tissues. Bring out the tissues, the Kleenex here. So Hashem says, quiet. I don't want to hear that. Why? Because the Khatam Sofer says that the Egyptians drowned 10,000 Jewish babies in various decrees against the Jewish population. The Egyptians were worried that the Jewish people, with their population boom and growth, would overtake the Egyptians and join forces with other armies against the Egyptians. So they drowned 10,000 Jewish babies. Hashem, God says, measure for measure. It's true, I can save the Egyptians and also save the Jewish people. Jewish people will be untouched and they'll be saved, and the Egyptians will be blinded. They won't be able to come near the Jewish people. But you don't have to drown them. No, we have to drown them. Because measure for measure. God pays measure for measure. You destroy 10,000 babies, you will be punished in a similar fashion of drowning. Okay, folks, amazing. And we're still moving right along here with the Khatam Sofer. He's just hitting it out. As you say, TD, touchdown, Tomer Devora, the ball is still traveling. So, next step. Okay. The Khatam Sofer tells us there are two types of salvations. One is Jews and non-Jews make a treaty, a peace treaty. That is one type of salvation. The Jewish people are in danger, and God can bring upon a ceasefire, we might call it, a treaty of peace. That is one possibility. Khatam Sofer says such a solution is frightening, since there are many possible negative ramifications that can come from such an agreement, from such a ceasefire. You don't have to go too far in history to look in the history of the state of Israel. You don't have to look too far back to see how many times the world pressured the Jewish people. The enemy was on the verge of total defeat and destruction. And the world came and saved them. And we went according to their tune, unfortunately. So we understand this. So, an example of the negative ramifications, he brings down two cases. One was Jacob making a treaty, a covenant with Levin, and Jacob bowing to his brother Esau. According to the Khatam Sofer, both of these treaties, peace treaties that were made, brought upon calamity to the Jewish people's heads. How is that? Well, number one, very clear, as far as Jacob and Lavan is concerned, there is an amazing Nachmanides, the Ramban. He says in Genesis 32, verse 13, he talks about the fact that he doesn't understand, Nachmanides does not understand why in the world is Jacob afraid of Esau. Didn't God just promise him, a couple days ago, maybe it was a week or so ago, didn't he promise that, when Jacob took his family and they departed from the White House, the Beit Lavan, if you got the joke, when they departed and Jacob takes his family and there's a covenant. So, God promises to be with him. What is he afraid of now? Why is he afraid of Esau? Didn't God promise him when he was frightened from Lavan that Hashem would protect him? Why is he afraid? So Nachmanides comes and he really hits it out of the park. He says, it could very well be that he realized that he'd made a mistake and he made a covenant with a wicked person, like Lavan. And that's what he was afraid of, that he had sinned in making a covenant with a wicked person like Lavan. And now, because of the fact that he sinned, that sin will cost him in the next round of adversaries like his brother Esau. But this is really amazing. This I never knew till this past week. It says in Sefer HaYashar an amazing point. It was a question we should have asked ourselves all these years. But sometimes, we're sleeping. What's the question? How in the world did Esau know that Jacob was around? Don't forget, these two people have not seen each other for 36 years. Amazingly. 14 years, Jacob was in a Talmudic seminary, in a yeshiva. And 22 years, he was at the White House, the house of Lavan. 36 years has gone by. Now there's no CNN, there's no Sky News, there's no Fox News that are bringing, there's no surveillance cameras that we have today. I heard today there's something like, a tremendous amount of numbers in New York of surveillance cameras all over. They must have that whole state covered with their surveillance cameras over there. So they had none of this. How in the world, first of all, didn't we ever think of that question? That's also a question on us. But what is the answer? So, the Sefer HaYashar, and also in another midrash, it is brought down an amazing thing. You know how he knew? Lavan wanted to Lavan wanted to bring down Jacob bring down Jacob. So therefore, he got a message. I don't know if it's Twitter or Facebook. Somehow he got a message out to Esau. Listen, your brother is coming. You know that brother that stole your blessings? Now is your chance to avenge that stealing of Jacob. This is an amazing thing. Jacob, this is the man that you made a covenant. This is a man that you trust. Now we understand, putting Nachmanides, the Ramban, and the Sefer HaYashar together, now we understand, wow, what is going on? Now I can understand why he was afraid after that mistake of making a covenant with Lavan. I can understand now he was afraid that he would also now fall because of that sin, of making this covenant and falling and believing in such a low life. He didn't learn his lesson 100 times. We are told in the Talmud that 100 times Lavan lied and changed the working conditions of Jacob. You didn't get the message by now? If you don't learn from history, you are doomed to repeat history. So this is an amazing combination, a 1-2 punch by Nachmanides and also by the Sefer HaYashar. But, we don't have to go much further. If we look at the Tractate of Sanhedrin on page 105, we see there, side A, it tells us that don't think that this agreement between Jacob and Lavan and his nation was kept. Well, we see that right away. I mean, from the first minute, it was not kept. From the first minute, Lavan goes and he passes a message to Esau. Here's your opportunity to hit and to knock off your brother Jacob. So from the first second, this agreement was violated. But not so. It's much more than that. In the times of Lavan, And from this information, I just want to say, just hit me right now. We say every year on Passover, and this is a verse in Deuteronomy, that Lavan wanted to destroy us. How do we see that? We don't really see that he wanted to destroy us. Well, we see it right now. From the thanks to Nachmanides and thanks to the book of the righteous, we understand now that he wanted to eliminate, take out Jacob. Next, from the same family, the same nation, came no other than Bilam. Bilam Bilam caused the Jewish people to lose 24,000 men because of they instigated Jewish people to sin with the daughters of Midian. So Bilam is from the same nation as Lavan. Last but not least, in the book of the Judges, here comes the judge. In chapter 3, we have Kushan Rishatayim, who subjugated the Jewish people for no less than 8 years. 8 years. So we see over and over again the dangers of making a covenant with the nations of the world, because they do not stand up to their words. You don't have to go back too far. Look this up. Look at how what happened to the agreement that various nations had with the Russians regarding Ukraine. Look that one up. So we see the words of the nations, they're not worth much. So that is the lesson that the Khatam Sofer is beginning to tell us. There are two types of ways to end a feud. One is by making some kind of treaty, and there's a big danger to that. There's a big danger that in the end you will pay the price. So we see that throughout the generations, the Jewish people paid the price for the agreement, for the peace treaty between Lavan and Jacob. And we see also another example that Nachmanides brought down, is that when Jacob appeased his brother Esav, this caused the birth, instead of eliminating an enemy, Esav, Jacob appeased Esav. And from Esav comes, drum roll, none other than Amalek. Who is Amalek? The whole story of Purim is Amalek, a nation that stood up to destroy the Jewish people. Not once, not twice, not 3, 5 times, we said in the first class. All our classes should always be first class. So this is an amazing thing. And in fact, what is the story of Purim? The story of Purim is that Mordechai was needed. Mordechai was a reincarnation of Jacob, and he needed to come back and not bow down after Jacob bows down 7 times to his brother. This brought upon the birth of Amalek. Amalek represents the desire to destroy the Jewish people. This was brought up on an appeasement, as Jacob tried to appease instead of eliminate. People today are crying, oh, war is always bad. No, war is not always bad when it comes to the enemies of the Jewish people. Instead, we have mercy on them, and eventually they become cruel to us. It backfires every time. War is not always bad. Let's get it straight. Going on. The second type of salvation that's brought down by the Khatam Sofer is when God destroys our enemies. Here there are no negative backlashes. Amazing. In fact, we are told by the Chatam Sofer that, also connected to the holiday of Purim, that the sin of the golden calf, which brought a physical threat upon the Jewish people, God wanted to eliminate the Jewish people and start a new nation with Moses. So this was, how did the golden calf come about? This, he says, was because of the covenant that Abraham made with Esau and not eliminating him. Why? From this covenant came Amalek, because Esau was allowed to continue living. He had relations, and from the relations he had a son who was Amalek, and eventually the nation of Amalek came and wanted to, in every generation, they're out to destroy the Jewish people. So the first battle between the Jewish people and Amalek, we know that the Jewish people, this meeting with Amalek brought a question mark in the Jewish people. Is God really with us? Because of the fact that the Jewish people, when they met up with Amalek, how did Amalek come to the world? Because of the fact that Jacob did not finish the work, did not finish off his brother. He allowed him to live. He allowed him to live. He had children. He had relations. He had children. Amalek comes out and wants to destroy the Jewish people. They meet up with the Jewish people. This meeting between the Jewish people, Amalek, this meeting of two nations together brought upon a negativity to the Jewish people. This connection, this battle between the two and a coming together between the two nations brought a question mark to the Jewish people. Is God really with us? This question mark was the deciding factor when Moses delayed coming back. That question mark, is God still with us, brought upon the sin of the golden calf, which almost destroyed the Jewish people royally and totally, if not for the mercy of God and the prayers of Moses to have mercy upon the Jewish people. And this is why before Purim we bring the half of a shekel. We brought money. We donated money for the golden calf. Now we have to donate money for good causes, for the building of the temple, for the building of the tabernacle. That's the idea here. And that is connected to the slight negativity of Jacob, a slight transgression of Jacob of not finishing off the job with his brother who came to kill him. So anyways, that's the lesson of the amazing lesson of the Chatam Sofer. We should always remember it. Two types of salvation. One is making a treaty, making a peace, and the negativity of that. And one is finishing off the job. Okay. Last but not least, the Great Reset. Yeah, that's the name of the class. What do we see here? Dearest friends, Purim is the Great Reset. This is no conspiracy theory. It is the Great Reset. Number one, the Great Reset. On Passover, what's so special, what's so great, what's so eternal? We are told that the holiday of Purim will be eternal. Unlike, let's say, Passover, which will not be eternal. There will be tremendous events that will happen that will make Passover pale to what we see coming. So, on Passover, what was the negativity amongst the Jewish people? The Jews did not want to see revenge or punishment against the Egyptians. Purim comes to rectify that. On Purim, we come, Esther comes, and we say, listen, can you give us another day of vengeance against the nations? Amazing. Here we're asking for another day of vengeance against the nations that stood up against the Jewish people. Amazing. On Passover, God has to tell the Jewish people not to pray via Moses, because they would pray that the Egyptians wouldn't be touched. Passover. In Passover, it's a miraculous salvation. And Purim is much greater, because Purim is not a supernatural event. It's a event of nature. If you look at every piece of the puzzle in the time of Purim, you don't see any miracle. It's all natural. When there's a party and the princess refuses to come out naked, you can understand the king getting upset. And then he needs another princess. And you can understand he has a pageant, and all of a sudden it could be that a Jewess named Esther was chosen. You could explain away all the years, the 9 years that the story is taking place. We can explain every chapter. It's only when we see the whole puzzle in its entirety, we see, well, this could only be from God. But it's through nature. So therefore, Purim is the great reset, because Purim is going back to beginning. It's going back to nature, going back to the days of creation. The great reset is also their desire to control and bring the world to their knees and bring a global leadership with the peoples of the world that are enslaved to these global elitists. That's exactly. The Ralbag, the commentator the Ralbag, tells us that when we look at what is greater, a miracle performed by God or nature, when we see God's hand in nature. And he says very clearly, we see God's hand in nature. This is much greater, because when God created a world, he created nature. And we should be able to bring sanctification to God's name through natural means. When we need a supernatural miracle, there is something, according to the Ralbag and others, something lacking here. Because when God created the world, that should be enough. In those 6 days, we should have all the so-called ammunition that we need, the natural ammunition, in order to progress in the world, seeing that God is one. When you have to resort to supernatural miracles, there is something lacking. So, once again, the great reset is Purim. Purim brings us back to the greatness of nature. No supernatural miracles happened here. It's going back, the great reset of Purim. Next, why is Purim the great reset? Is because we see that the wicked, with all their plans to control the world, God brought upon their own downfall through their actions. Through the natural course of their actions, they brought upon themselves their own downfall. This is an amazing point. That is the greatness of Purim. There's nothing supernatural. It's not God doing the damage here. It is people themselves doing their damage. And that is exactly what we're seeing with this whole discussion, the Great Reset. Okay? That we see that right before our very own eyes. We see all these leaders of nations which were bred in the WEF, World Economic Forum, and all of a sudden they're leaders in countries, and if there's in Argentina, if it's in Canada, France, they were bred in the WEF, the Great Reset. So their whole plan to control the human population and to enslave the human population. We don't need people anymore. We have our technology, the AI, everything. They will bring upon themselves, through a natural course, they will bring upon themselves their own downfall. We see so many, we see today so many cracks in the whole pandemic picture. Who brought upon the cracks? This was not a miraculous discovery of what was really going on during the pandemic. This is something that is taking its natural course, and we're seeing crack after crack. Their whole ideology is beginning slowly to fall, and we're beginning to realize what was done to us during this last 2 years of the pandemic. Okay, next. Let me just get this. Okay. Okay, so Purim is all the wicked with all of their programs and plans to control. They themselves bring upon their own downfall. That is the great reset. They're in the process of bringing down their own downfall, and let us say amen. Next. We have on Purim, this is the great reset. Why is that? Because the original plan of creation, we see that the hierarchy is feared. We see animals, we could still see that today. Many animals fear human beings. When they see a human being, they take off. Not all, okay, but most. Now, in the original creation, when God created, it should be that there is, as God has stated very clearly in the Torah, that God created a world where the animal kingdom, which is below the human kingdom, fears human beings. But we know that it's mostly true, but there are animals that put the fear of God into people. Why is that? It's only because of the fact that we have screwed up, so to speak. We have tainted our soul. And therefore, we have lowered ourselves to the levels of the animals, and now the animals can, some of them, can place fear and destroy us, because we've lowered ourselves down to the levels of the animal kingdom. Now, so too, this is brought down in the amazing, in Tikkunei Zohar, the 69th rectification. It's on page 109, side A. He says an amazing thing, that when God created the world, He created that the nations of the world would fear the Jewish people, which means that nature really should be that the nations of the world should fear the Jewish people. Where do we see this? Very clearly. If you look at Chronicles 1, chapter 16, we see many verses that talk about our forefathers and mothers that went through nations that were hostile. And the nations, the kings, etc., the nations, they did not touch Abraham or Isaac or Jacob, though they wanted to. Why? Because of the fact that these, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, etc., they were tremendously holy. They kept their soul, their holy soul, pure. And therefore it brought upon fear to the nations. And therefore they went through nation after nation, came in contact, and nothing happened to them. They walked out unscathed, amazingly. Okay, that's the idea that should have been not just for a selected righteous amount of people. That is the way the world was set up, to fear the Jewish people. That is the way it is, because the Jews have a soul that is not present amongst the nations. The nations have a nephesh. that is not the same as a neshama. So therefore, the nature should be of the world that the nations fear the Jewish people. Now we know that because of our sins, that throughout history, most of the time that's not been the case. However, one time a year that comes back. When is that? That is on the holiday of Purim. That returns. How is that so? We have amazing, listen to this, it's really amazing. On Purim, the world returns to its original state, the Great Reset, where the world fears the Jewish people. We see that in the story of Purim, that the nations started becoming converts because they feared the Jewish people. Imagine that. And so, this Purim is eternal because this lesson of fearing the Jewish people is an eternal lesson. It will always be. However, because of our actions or our transgressions, we've destroyed that holy soul of ours, and therefore we're subjugated to many nations, etc. But on Purim, we see one day during the year where the nations have this tremendous fear of this. It comes back every year. Where do we see that? That is found by, number one, the Yehudah. The Yehudah says in his book, Machzik Bracha, on chapter 687. The Yehudah brings in the name of a book called Kaf Vinaki, that the reason why we make noise when the name of Haman is recited 44 times in the scrolls, that is to instill fear into the hearts of the nations throughout the generations. The message is clear, an amazing Yehudah. You know why we make noise? Because we want to publicize the story. On Purim, we want to publicize the story because every Purim, this lesson comes back. This realization that the world comes back to its great reset, and we once again have a situation where the nations fear the Jewish people, just like on Purim, and they became converts because they feared the Jewish people. So once again, we want to publicize. We make noise during the name of Haman to publicize to all the nations, we are Jewish people. We continue this tradition. Do not mess with us. Look what happened when a nation, look what happened when an individual led a nation to try to destroy the Jewish people. Look what happened to him. 75,000+ of his nation were wiped out. This could be your lot if you mess with us. That is an amazing, great reset. Coming back to the natural, to the nature of the world where the nations fear the Jewish people. Moving right along, that same idea is not only by the Yehudah, is not only in the name of the Kaf Vinaki, but it's also brought down in Rabbi Chaim Falagi's book, Moed Kol Chai, chapter 31, paragraph 9. Moving right along, from Turkey, the great Rav Eliyahu HaKohen of Izmir, he writes in his Midrash Eliyahu book, he writes the following, that every year, why do we make noise when we read the name of Haman? He gives a little bit of different take than we heard a couple of minutes ago. He says an amazing thing. Every year, why do we make noise? Because the wicked return to receive their punishments. There is something special on Purim, a great reset that is happening. This is no conspiracy theory. The wicked return to the world to receive their punishment. Every time we make noise, every time we stamp our feet, every time we bang on the table, when we hear that name, the wicked return to the world and receive their punishments anew. This is not some old time. This is new time. Don't bring us the old time religion, bring us the new time. religion. This is, you are being reincarnated, you wicked people. You are being reincarnated to once again fall and be punished. This happens on the day of Purim, and that's why we make noise. Okay, moving right along. The Great Reset. On Purim, we re-received the Torah. On Mount Sinai, we received the Torah. That is true, but we received it out of fear. The point of Purim is that we received the Torah. We added, so to speak, we added onto the Torah. What did we add onto the Torah? An entire new book called the Scrolls of Esther. Okay, this is out of love. This is out of happiness. So, we know that at the original Mount Sinai, when the Torah was given, the nations of the world turned to the Gentile prophet named Bilam, and he said, "What's going on? It seems like God, we're so fearful that we are going to be destroyed, that God is going to destroy us." Bilam said, "No, God is just giving the Torah. You're not going to be destroyed." We see that there was a certain reset. When the nations heard about the receiving of the Torah, this put fear, this instilled fear into them, of the Jewish people. This instilled fear, and that's the whole lesson of Purim, that the nations feared. They became converts. 75,000, they did not mess any longer with the Jews. The Jews are victorious. People are afraid of the Jews. That is the Great Reset. That is how the world should look. When you see somebody, when you see a righteous person, you lower yourself towards that person. It's simple. You don't have to, even within the Jews, there are the priests, the Kohanim, there are the Levites, and then the Israel. Not everyone is the same. Not at all. So much more so, the nations of the world and the Jewish people, totally different level. The natural level should be that the nations respect, fear out of awe the Jewish people. So that happened on Mount Sinai when the nations were afraid of the Jewish people. They were afraid. So too the story when the Jewish people received the Torah on Purim. And therefore the nations feared the Jewish people. The same story of Mount Sinai happens. Great Reset, it goes again. And once again, this reoccurs every year on Purim, this Great Reset. So if anyone comes up to you and tells you these are conspiracy theories, you know, the Great Reset, tell them, God forbid, this is the Great Reset that the Jewish people will see, God willing, this coming Purim.